Years ago, I was watching a friend play Minecraft. He was running around in a cave, fighting off monsters, mining ores, the usual stuff, when suddenly, he got into a tricky situation with a zombie. He was cornered and was continuously losing health one heart at a time. Now I thought, that's rough, he's going to have to walk all the way back to where he died. But as he reached his final heart, he didn't die. He simply paused the game, went into settings and set the difficulty to peaceful. When he unpaused the game, the zombie was gone and his health was recharging back to full again. Once it was full, he just set the difficulty back to the way it was again, and continued like nothing happened. Now I said, hang on a minute, you can't do that, that's cheating. And he turned to me and he simply said, I don't care, and continued playing. I sat and thought for a while. I've been playing Minecraft for years, dying to mobs over and over, when this guy has just been hopping difficulty whenever he got close to dying. And what do I have to show for it? Nothing. In fact, I have less to show for it, because while I was dead, this guy was making progress. It's not like our save games look any different. They both say hard difficulty on them in settings. Something must have snapped in my brain that day, because from then on, it became a major downside if a game lets me change the difficulty at any point with no consequence. When you choose a difficulty, you're accepting a challenge, you're saying you're going to abide by the selected rule set. And if I choose a harder difficulty, I at least expect the game to respect my decision enough to indicate in some way that I actually put the effort in to beat the game and the difficulty I signed up to. I'm not even asking for special content, a shiny sticker or even an achievement. I just want the tiniest indication that the game I have played so far has always been on the difficulty that I chose. When you give the player the ability to swap the difficulty in and out at any point, you lose this integrity, and you diminish the sense of accomplishment you feel for challenging yourself to beat the game on a harder difficulty. It makes me feel foolish for going to the effort of persevering through challenging content when the skip button was staring me in the face. Even Nintendo, who typically target a more casual audience, understand that acknowledging the player's additional effort is important. In Super Mario 3D Land, there is an easy mode in the form of a white Tanuki suit power-up, which only appears if the player has died 5 times. Upon accepting this power-up, the stars that appear on your save file will no longer sparkle. This is a great way of rewarding some hardcore completionist players for playing through the game without using easy mode, while at the same time providing a casual or younger player with the option to lower the difficulty at any time. Hades is an example of a game that has a similar mechanic, but did not implement a record of whether you have chosen easy mode during your playthrough. When I picked up Hades and had to choose between standard difficulty or the game's hard mode, I chose the hard mode despite the standard mode being more at my level and more appropriate for me. I did this because, upon looking into standard mode, I realised there was an easy mode switch you could turn on at any time, with zero indication that the player had done this to progress through the game. It might seem insane, but I would rather have a more frustrating experience on hard mode than play through the game knowing that I could switch on easy mode at any time. We're going back a long time now, but when I played through Skyrim, I set the difficulty to the lowest possible. There was no benefit to having it set higher, and I could always put it higher later on when I wanted to. If there was some indication of the lowest difficulty I had played on, I might have challenged myself to stick to a higher difficulty, but without this, I had nothing stopping me from cruising through on easy when the game got challenging. And I understand that the majority of people watching this are just thinking, just don't lower the difficulty, commit to sticking it out on the higher difficulty and be satisfied that you know you didn't lower it yourself. And I agree this sounds completely sensible, and I wish that's how I thought it, but subconsciously I feel discouraged if the game doesn't acknowledge when I challenge myself. And I know while not the majority, there are plenty of players who feel the same way as me. Whether a game acknowledges this or not is completely pointless to someone who doesn't feel the same way, but catering to me and other people who feel the same is very easy to do. There are so many solutions to it. I'm sure that if developers are aware that this is an issue to some people, they'll easily be able to make games more appealing to people like me. Here's a few examples of ways this can be handled in games. I've seen the first 2 of these methods implemented in games already. Simply add the option for the player to lock the difficulty from the start of the game. This stops the player from being tempted to change the difficulty, preserves the integrity of the difficulty. However, this by definition is irreversible and does not allow the player to change their mind on the difficulty once selected. Another option is, after picking the difficulty for the first time, your game could allow the user to lower the difficulty but prevent them from raising it. This means the player can reach the end of the game and feel accomplished for beating it on nothing lower than the difficulty they have selected currently. However, this is quite restrictive in that players are now unable to increase the difficulty if they want to be challenged more later on. A less restrictive alternative to this is simply showing the lowest difficulty you played on next to the difficulty setting. This would allow players to move the difficulty back up and would still maintain a record of the highest level of challenge they've played on. The only downside to this is it might be annoying for players who played on a lower difficulty near the start of the game not to have the highest level of difficulty they played on recognised. There is somewhat of a solution to this, but I think it's excessive. You could have a difficulty log, which details the playtime the player had when they changed the difficulty every time. Overall though, I think the least intrusive way of solving this issue is my third suggestion of keeping track of the lowest difficulty you've played on. This could get a bit more difficult if the game allows you to modify different aspects of the difficulty, but it wouldn't be too difficult to just track this for each individual setting. Developers are aware that this is an issue to some players, and have tried ways to resolve it. Way back in version 1.8, Minecraft added the option to lock the difficulty. The player has to create the world first, then lock the difficulty from settings. While this succeeds in giving the player an option to prevent themselves from getting tempted to change the difficulty later on, I think the way this was implemented has a few flaws. First of all, it doesn't guarantee the save game has been played on the locked difficulty for any length of time. I could complete the game on easy, then lock it to hard. Additionally, say the player genuinely wanted to lower the difficulty at a later point, and regretted their decision to lock it. You may say that's on them, but this whole situation could have been avoided by this system working slightly differently. I think all that is really needed is a note next to the difficulty setting which says the lowest difficulty the save has been played on. This avoids all of the issues mentioned before and still acts as a deterrent for changing the difficulty in a difficult situation. A while ago, No Man's Sky implemented a way to alter the difficulty in different ways on the fly at any point, and this upset some players. After some backlash, they decided to implement a way to lock the difficulty, which is flawed in the same way as Minecraft's difficulty lock, by the way. When they announced that they would be making this change, the response from players who didn't care about this was dismissive to say the least. The main issue I have with the way people respond to this is that they don't seem to understand that other people don't think the same way as them. The response of "don't use the settings" doesn't really address the issue that some players have with this. I know I can just avoid the setting, but the fact that I can skip challenges so easily diminishes the sense of accomplishment from overcoming the challenges. It's a psychological thing that only affects some people, not really a flaw in a practical sense. I think this is mainly just a case of players thinking about and playing games slightly differently. If someone plays a game differently to me, I don't get angry when developers add things to cater to them, especially when the change doesn't affect anyone else's experience. I think the same courtesy can be extended here. It won't hurt anyone just to add something to satisfy people who like a confirmation on the difficulty they've played on. I'm not suggesting the players who lower the difficulty or play at a level of challenge that suits them are doing something wrong. I think games should be as accessible to as many players as possible, and developers of a game should make it as easy as possible for players to tailor their experience to their liking, even on the fly while playing the game. However, they should include features like the ones I've mentioned to satisfy players who enjoy challenging themselves and would like their efforts to be acknowledged. I believe both of these things are easily achievable together.